My guest today is Anthony Roberts. Anthony, I've known for a long time simply because he is a consummate professional within our business. I know that he's done a lot of work with addictions, and I know, and he has a lot of other experience as well. But in our chat today, we're going to be talking about the work that he's done with addictions through the years. So, welcome, Anthony.
Thanks very much, Tanya, for having me today.
Ah, it's a pleasure.
It's good to catch up with you again.
Absolutely. So, Tony, what got you interested in addictions?
I did my training in emotional freedom techniques, EFT, and neuro linguistic programming, NLP. And I was looking for something in the community, some work that I could do. And a local organisation, Cumbria Drug and Alcohol Advisory Service, they had an advertisement in the local paper saying that they were running a 6-month course to work with people with addictions, dependencies, mainly focusing on substance use. So I applied to do the training and I had an interview, then I got accepted and I did the 6 months training and it covered a whole wide range of things. We looked at drugs initially when we started off, but that was only a small part of it. So some drugs we think of being bad drugs and good drugs. So we might have an aspirin and think that's a good drug. But if we take something like cocaine, that could be classed as a bad drug. But over history, perspectives have changed on this. So years ago, if you went to the dentist, you get prescribed in the UK a cannabis cigarette to smoke to ease the pain. Or the Vatican used to recommend cocaine wine because they used to produce cocaine wine and they used to say it was a good drink to have to invigorate the health. But obviously, over time, our thinking and views have changed. But most of the time, I think it's just we perceive things to be good and bad. And they're all the same things. They have an effect on our biology. And it's just recognizing there's some side effects with some drugs and some benefits with some drugs. And it's just not useful really classifying them as good or bad drugs. When I did my training, it involved a lot of NLP. So if anyone knows about NLP, we looked at things like the meta model, which is asking questions, but the questions that are really highly rated open questions to get really interesting answers off the person about how they view life and everything and exploring with them what the life's about. We did some stuff on transactional analysis, a little bit on CBT. We looked at family systems, and towards the end, after we complete the training, we did something called black box training, which ties in a little bit with EFT because what it was doing, it was looking at the meridian system. We used 10 units. Now, 10 units are little devices run by batteries, which send out a little electronic pulse, and it just gives a little pulsing sensation in the body. So initially what we used to do was 13 points on the ear. So it was like auricular therapy, going around doing 13 points. Then we'd allow the person to have half an hour to relax. And we put pads on the hands and put a pulse through the hands and clips on the earlobes and send a pulse at a different frequency through the earlobes. And depending on what they were presenting, we could adjust these frequencies to best suit the person. And they could choose any music of their choice. Some of the people there used to put on whale music or dolphins. I used to say, oh, just bring in what you like and we'll put that on. So people used to come in with Black Sabbath and different things that you wouldn't normally expect to be linked to relaxing, but they found it relaxing. So I just went with what they did. But with the black box treatment, that linked into EFT. And at a later date, what I did, I brought in EFT into the organization and I would train people within the organization in EFT. And I also trained something called integral eye movement therapy. So I was training people to do that So they had more resources to use. So with me initially doing that, I started doing training within the organization and bringing different things in. And people found it really useful. And I started my own program within the organization after that, which was called SMEP, which
What was that? A SMEP?
SMEP, it stands for Self Motivational Energy Program.
Mhm.
So it was run over 5 half days, and it was like a first aid for addictions. We had quite a big waiting list. So when people were on the waiting list, they had the option to go on the SMEP training, which was 5 half days over 5 weeks. And what I'd do is introduce them to a tapping technique, but without words. And it'd be a group of, say, about 12 people. I've worked with bigger groups than 12. And also the dogs have been there and everything. So it was a bit of a mixed bag. But I'd bring in the tapping, show them how to do the tapping. I'd introduce them to various communication skills that they could use in situations that we're finding a little bit tricky. State management techniques, so we'd get them to manage how they were feeling and how they want to feel in situations. I'd teach them how to set goals and set goals in a way so it gets results for them. Designing affirmations, so come up with an affirmation, then adapt it in several ways so it sounds better and a better fit for themselves to use as an affirmation, and they can use tapping when they're doing that affirmation or just repeat it to themselves. Flipping the beliefs, so if they have beliefs that aren't supporting them in any way, I'd show them a tapping technique to shift them beliefs. And an educational awareness, not of the substance use or anything, but about themselves. So things that might be outside their awareness, I'd focus their attention in on that. So that program ran for quite a while, and it was getting really good results. People were getting changes and not referring into the organization any further. And others who went into the organization to work on deeper issues, with the people working there having a knowledge of EFT, the people who have been on the training of SMEP were already introduced to it, so it didn't seem strange to them. So they could just sort of seamlessly move into the counselling and coaching that the organisation was offering, and just find that it was something that sat really comfortably with them.
Oh. Well, thank you for sharing that. Oh, I think there's a lot of information there, Tony. We're going to have to break that down, aren't we?
Yeah.
I
I
have
should have took breaks in there, maybe.
What's that?
I should have broke it up a little bit there, maybe.
No, there was a lot you wanted to share, so we're going
Yeah.
to break that down because I think it's really invaluable information. And I mean, first off, a question that comes to mind is because, and don't know if I can pronounce this word, auricular.
Auricular therapy.
Yeah.
It's using acupuncture on the ear. So
Mm,
we used to get a little probe and just go around 13 points on
mhm.
the ear. And they'd have a pad on the hand, and that'd make the circuit. And it's only a 9-volt battery, so it's just a very gentle sensation that it creates. And we used to set the level so it was comfortable for the person. Some people, they thought, well, if it's stronger and I can feel it more, it'll work better, but it doesn't work that way. So
Yeah.
we had to explain that first and just have it at a gentle level for them.
Yeah, I mean, first off, people always think if I do it harder,
Yeah.
violently, it's going to get it. No, that's not the case with a lot of these things. But the reason why I brought you back to that is that's a form of acupressure, acupuncture, kind of another model of that. You're working on that same idea. You're putting uh, power into their system, into their energy channels, and the
Yeah.
ears are very important, aren't they? But pulling it back, my question would be, because this is my EFT Unleashed channel. How did that, what was the purpose of that? What were you doing? You're putting these kind of have little electrical impulses into them. What was the purpose? What were you looking to achieve by doing that, Anthony? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things about doing the auricular therapy was to unblock channels in the body. So if there was blocks in the body, it would block the channels. The second bit, which was half an hour listening to music with the pads on the hands and the earlobes, that was to balance the body. So if they had an alcohol and cocaine addiction, it just gave them some time out and it allowed the body to heal. People as well, when they were doing the relaxation bit, they don't have any relaxation in their lives. They never had an opportunity just to lie back for half an hour and be with themselves and just have that pulsing going on and some relaxing music. Some people chose not to have music. Some people would like to chat, so I chat with them as it was going on. Everyone was slightly different, and it was just using what worked for the person that was in front of you.
So if I get that right, then what you're looking at is kind of to give them time out from a stress response to some degree, taking the blockages out, because health is about being in a state of flow, whereby energy is flowing through the system and not blocked at various points. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Sometimes when we were doing a point, we put it on there and we turn it up till they could just feel it. And sometimes we turn it up to 10 and they couldn't feel it at all.
Wow.
But you could see the side of the face, the muscle inside the face pulsing because there was some stimulus going on there. But obviously, with there been a block there, that signal was not getting through to the rest of the body. So once they started to feel it just slightly, then you could just knock it back the setting so it was at a lower level and that would clear out the blockage. So you could see it visually changing.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the imagery that comes to mind for me is like you see rivers and dams in them. I think which animal creates dams in rivers?
It's an otter.
Yeah, I thought it was an otter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see these little dams created by the otter, and what you're doing is putting like a tidal wave coming down. And that's the imagery that came to mind when you were saying that, and therefore getting the river, the flow of energy through the
Yeah.
body. And like I said, health is about flow. When
Yeah.
your body's in a state of flow, you're in a greater place of health and balance. Yeah. So then the question that comes, so you're creating that back into flow, of course. So and then later on, you said you introduced EFT. How did the two things compare? What was the EFT doing?
The EFT was more brought into focus on specific issues. So the black box therapy was a more generalized approach to health and well-being. But if the person had a specific issue, maybe a trauma, or they had an unresolved emotion, we could specifically identify that, then use the tap in with that event or the thing that had happened to them or what they were experiencing in the moment.
What I would also say is why you started off with this kind of way of bringing them back into balance, into flow. If a person's in a stress response, the body stops repairing and regenerating itself. And I would say repairing and regeneration isn't just about physical. Yeah. It's emotional, isn't it?
It is.
Clearing out the past traumas, the emotional things. That's also repair and regeneration because the body is stunningly amazing if you support it.
Yeah. And the body, if it's got another issue, a blockage or anything, it puts all its energy into that. So additional energy is being taken from other parts of the body that would normally just be ticking over nicely. If that's not happening, then other problems start showing up in the body.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, because the body it's a survival machine, really, isn't it?
It is.
it prior the body prioritizes survival. So if you're in a state in which it thinks, oh, you're under threat here, it's going to put all the resources that direction, And what we want to do and what you were doing here is, all right, let's get back into flow. Let's get the body into repair, regeneration, And so you're kind of getting it back into a healthy pattern, and then beginning to work on all the traumas with the EFT.
Yeah, and it's also looking at the bigger picture. So it's sort of basically taking a biosocial approach of things. So it might be that they don't have skills in making nutritious meals. They might need other skills. So it's helping them out in other things that they might need in the outside world to cope, that they haven't had learnt the skills for. So we used to have a health and well-being worker who used to focus on people and how they can improve their health generally, and just different things that they might need. They might need help with writing letters and that, and we might refer them on to other services. We might not provide a service that they need, so we'd find a service that might provide literacy courses and recommend them to them and see if they wanted to do that. So there was always looking at multiple aspects of what was going on for the person, besides looking at what's going on emotionally and what's going on a lot of time trauma-wise. Trauma was always one thing that seemed to stand out with addictions.
Yeah, well, I pull that right back. If you can't write and you need to write to get a job,
Yeah,
that's going to cause stress and trauma, isn't
it
it?
is definitely.
You
And
know.
it stops you engaging fully in life. They've done plenty of research on rats where they put rats in a not very good environment and they don't respond very well. But if they put them in an environment where they can flourish and play and everything, they learn things faster, they do things better, they engage more socially. So the environment that people in is dependent on how they respond and how the body responds to the challenges of life.
Yeah, and what come up when you said that was the idea. If you're starting off, you start off with your program, getting them into a more balanced state, we learn better. Yeah, if
Yeah,
you're in a high stress state, well, it's all about survival. We don't necessarily learn learn very well at all in that situation because we tend to switch to our automatic patterns of survival. And what you're doing is bringing back to balance and then teaching these skills, which of course changes your whole concept of yourself, isn't it? I like the idea of the healthy nutrition aspect because it's beginning to change how you relate to everything. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And it was a big part of the organization at the time. Unfortunately, the person providing that left the organization a few years later, but
Mm-hmm.
they're now teaching in a university in London. So things keep moving around, things keep changing, budgets keeps changing. So there's always a bit of a battle between providing the assistance that people need and the finances as well. So with charitable organisations, it's always a bit of a battle to get some money to run schemes and things.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you're using a very holistic approach right across the
Yeah,
board, targeting anything that might be contributing to where they are with this addiction, and which is very, very powerful. So you said a lot of trauma was a common theme here. You said that, yeah? Mm-hmm.
yeah. Generally, what happened with trauma, they were referred on to one of the other organisations that deals with trauma. But if they didn't tick all the boxes, then we'd work with them and use things like EFT and integral eye movement therapy and other approaches to help them with that trauma and deal with that.
Which is interesting because I would personally class EFT as a very incredible, powerful trauma technique. Mhm.
Yeah, it is.
So you said if they didn't tick, so if they ticked all the boxes, where would they go to? What type of therapist or therapy?
It basically be trauma-based CBT, I think, that they get referred to. But that was the standard way of the way the system works.
Yeah.
As an organization, we can teach them EFT, we can teach it on the emotions, we can teach it on problems. But if it's classed as post-traumatic stress or trauma, then it was referred on to another organisation.
Yeah, and I see the what would I call that? Yeah, it's because that's been accepted, I think, by NICE and ICE. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So just because it's kind of got that tick box in there, then it's almost automatically you have to refer on to that.
yeah. And it's all about procedures. So initially, when someone comes in and uh, wants to use the service, most people that we saw were self-referring, so they came themselves. We do a care plan with them, so that would be doing safeguarding, make sure that they're in a safe environment, because people who do substance use, they're more liable to be taken advantage of, the higher risk of different things. And so safeguarding's a real key element of dealing with that. And if someone's got a constant stream of drink and they're drinking every day, for them it'd be dangerous to them to stop immediately.
Mm.
So they'd have to be referred on to the GP or another service. And the same if someone was taking other medication, it's advisable that they see the GP, so the medication gets tapered down gradually, so there's no big response by the body system when that's taken away.
So if they were to stop immediately, just come clean off the alcohol, what could happen to that person?
There's a possibility they might start fitting and injuring themselves. So generally what they prescribe is something like diazepam to calm the whole system down for a 10-day period,
Mm.
then gradually wean them off that. Other people, they need to go into a residential unit where they've been monitored and kept a close eye on as
Mm.
they start to recover.
All right. And this is where you're talking to people who are quite high end with this addiction, aren't we, really here?
Yeah, and usually if someone contacts me, I always ask how often do they drink, and if they're
Mm.
drinking regularly, I always say it would be a good idea to go and see your GP and just get checked over and make sure it's okay for you to go through this and maybe have a plan to reduce your drinks over a period of time, or if the GP thinks it's okay for you to stop immediately, because a decision like that, even though I've been involved with services and that, it is not a decision that I could make for a person.
Yeah, there's, I mean, at many levels, there's many reasons why it's not a decision you
Yeah,
could make, one of them being a legal reason.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, EFT can be used to help people with the side effect of coming off of drugs and alcohol. So, do you use it in that way, Tony? How do you use that?
I introduce as many people who are willing to learn about EFT when they used to come and see me, how to use it so they can use it in any aspect of their life. Um, I'm not sure if there's any research backing up that it would help with the sort of effects of reducing the intake of any substance, but I suspect it would. What one person that I was going through the SMEP training with, they were using drugs intravenously, and they learnt the SMEP and the tapping, and they were using the tapping, and they were getting benefits from that. But one time, what that happened was they were going to inject, and when they went to inject, the hand was shaking.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a planned intention when I was designing this. What they did, they started tapping, and the hand stopped shaking so they could inject. And I said to the person, well, what would have happened if you hadn't have done that? And they've gone, oh, well, I'd ejected anyway, and I'd have probably damaged my vein.
Oh, right.
So it does have a calming effect on, from what I know, on the whole body. So it can be used in many different ways. That was just the body. They hadn't used drugs for a while, and it was wanting to use drugs again. So with using the tapping, it calmed down the system, and rather than doing harm to himself, he was able to just take the intravenous drugs, and then re-engaged with the program and kept going on in the program. Didn't drop out of the program or anything. He just used that, and other issues that were wanting to be dealt with at a one-to-one level were dealt with later on in the program.
Yeah, so what I see there is he was able to come off of the drugs in a more balanced way. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that case, when he first initially attended the training, he hadn't used for a number of days. And then he got the situation in his life that he was going to use again. And he was suffering from the effects of not using for a while. So he was shaking, his hand was shaking, and he started tapping and it stopped all the shaking in his body. So it was a calming effect from the withdrawal symptoms he was having, which allowed him to inject, but without doing any harm to himself, which it doesn't really initially sound as a positive, but it is actually a positive because he wasn't doing any physical harm to himself when he was injecting.
Yeah, I mean, what you're looking at with this type of way of working with big high-end issues is it isn't about flash, bang, wallop and shifting from one place to another place like in seconds or minutes. It is a kind of a measured approach to dealing with a serious issue, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and generally it is taking a measured approach, looking at all the different areas that's involved in the person's life. But sometimes people used to come on the SMAC training and they had low mood, and when we finished, the mood had totally changed, and they didn't need the service anymore. So it's sort of just tailoring it for the needs of the person that's showing up.
Yeah, well, I think I'm not sure who said this, but it might have been someone like Einstein, but I could be wrong. Said, if you ever get diagnosed with a dis-ease, then change you so the disease does not recognize you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really what you're looking at there is change your beliefs, change everything, how you think, how you feel, change everything about you. Because when that shifts and changes, like the dis-ease, yeah, the problem state just can't exist within you, and I think that's what that was to some degree, really changing the person so they see the world in a very, very different way.
Yeah, definitely.
But pulling that right back, so we talked about trauma, and there you were talking about low mood, isn't it? I could imagine if you're in a low mood, you might use type of addictive substances to shift your mood or attempt to shift it in that way. Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, like if the most common thing that people will be used to is alcohol, and alcohol, when we have a drink, our spirits can be lifted and that, but it's actually a depressant. So even though it has an initial euphoric effect initially, it leads to a drop in mood over time.
Mm. All right. So initially, it's that initial euphoric stage, and as you say, it's an accumulative thing that's going to impact you. Yeah.
Yeah, and the body builds a tolerance towards it as well. So to get the initial effect that was so good, you have to up the dosage to get the same effect, and it doesn't last as long, and the side effects afterwards increase in severity.
All right. So pulling that right back, I know I spoke with you before, and you developed a simple way of working with people whereby they had a lot of stuff going on there. If say I was a person who came to you with this problem, what would be the first step that you would do with me?
The first thing is building trust. And once I've built trust with a person and I've explained my approach and what I'm going to do, I'll generally work on any traumatic events that's happened in their lives. So if there's a traumatic event that's been highlighted, I'll work with them first so it calms down the nervous system. And that's usually the first bit that I approach. So when I'm doing me note taking and everything initially in my first meeting, I find out about them and what they're doing at the moment, how it makes, I've got the wrong teeth in it, I think, how it meets their needs. So if someone's drinking, they've got a whole social aspect to the life maybe that they're involved with, and it's well, this is going to change as well. So it's looking at what's going to change, what they don't want to change, and finding that balance. And the things that they want to change, if they're getting needs from doing that at the moment, how would they go to replace that? So it's looking at the goals, how they're going to do things. But initially, from an EFT perspective or therapeutic perspective, it's looking at the trauma, taking them out of the way. Then, once the nervous system's settled down, identifying other things to work with them that might be beneficial for them to find a more enjoyable, more fulfilling life.
Yeah, because the addictive substance will be serving a purpose for them. There will be some kind of benefit they're getting from it. Mm-hmm.
Most definitely. And a lot of times it's trauma. Sometimes it can be pain. So they're self-medicating for the pain. So taking painkillers or alcohol to numb the sensation of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all looking at sort of, well, what's this serving a purpose for? Is there a way around it? And if a person's suffering from pain, EFT can be a great resource to teach them to bring down the levels so they're more comfortable with what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about what we class as a physical pain, yeah, and we have emotional pain as well. So,
Yeah,
but EFT is equally powerful with all different types of pain, isn't it? Because a lot of people will have some physical pain, and yet it's not really related to the injury because it's been there forever. It's like a chronic
yeah.
pain, which is often related to unprocessed emotion beneath the scene, isn't it, really? And EFT, very powerful at working with stuff like that. Mhm. What type of way do you use with EFT with that? What would be your go-to on EFT approaches? Mhm.
Um, Depending on what comes up, I usually look what's happening upstream. So the substance use is what's showing itself. So
Mhm.
I'll trace back what's contributing to flowing into this addiction to sustain this
Mm.
addiction that's going on. And I'll maybe use movie technique,
Yeah.
because I'll initially with all approaches that I take, I generally use the more gentle techniques. So I'll find ways that they can do things. If they're not in a way that they can engage with us fully at that moment in time, I might get them to do drawings and then use the tapping with the drawings. I'll give them homework to do. So I'll give them tasks to do.
Yeah.
You would go
I'll,
ask it.
I'll pull it back to movie technique because people listening may not know what that refers to, but that generally targets specific events that have happened to a person without the need to go into the event. Mhm.
Yeah, it's giving some distance so you can step away from that event and view it out there so you're not drawn into it. So it's a gentler way of working with people so they don't feel the full emotion of what happened at that time, but
Yeah.
they can bring that down. And as they do that, we can get them to engage more with the event that's happened. So then we can go to a more direct approach of tapping once the intensity of that movie that they've been watching out there
Mhm.
comes down to a 1 or a 0.
Yeah, no, I think it's important really to realize is if you're dealing with something that's happened in your past, yeah, which is what you're talking about there, you're dealing
Yeah,
with the past experiences. It is in the past, yeah.
yeah,
And the thing is, that means that they've obviously survived it because they wouldn't be there working with you if that were not the case, yeah.
yeah,
And you see, people don't think about it in this way. So really, it's not the event itself that is the problem because that's happened. They've been through it. Yeah. What's the problem is it's not processed. It's unprocessed emotion. So it's running active within their system as if it is still happening now. And when they go to do anything in life, the system is using that information from that event to control how they feel now. Yeah. Now, people I mean, I always think of it this way. So really, we're just dealing with a database, an
Yeah,
upgraded database. Yeah. All right. That's happened. It's the database that's the problem. It's the fact that that information is not processed out. So how can we process it out? Movie technique. Yeah. So we bring awareness to the event without a need to relive it. Yeah. So we don't have to relive the event to clear the event. Bring awareness to it. We tap on certain points on the body, whilst in a way we're tuned in, but not within the event. We're not having to relive, we're outside of it. So we target it with the movie technique, which just basically gives a title to refer to the event. And we tap on the acupoints, and very powerful, lovely approach. And like you say, when it gets right down intensity wise, when they're looking at that mood, when the intensity gets really low, then they can go into that and just tidy it up a little bit.
yeah. And I'm always using conversational tapping all the way through the session. So I'll introduce them to EFT, and we're always tapping away, because a lot of the time, what goes on for them, they're not really aware of. There's choices in their lives, but they're like invisible choices. They don't know that choice is there. So they might come home, they get in, and the next thing they've got a drink in their hand. And it just happens by magic, because it's just, well, this happens and that happens, but we're doing the tapping and just having a conversation. Oh, well, yeah, I'll go through this process before that happens. I didn't realize there was so much going on in between me doing this and doing that. So it's good to unpack things and see what's actually happening as well. And with them having an awareness of that, they can change their behavior within that moment before it actually happens.
Yeah, and the beauty there is, you said about conversation, you're tapping on the side of the hand, you're having a conversation, and the other person doesn't realize, it just feels like we're having this lovely conversation. And often, I mean, I always drop the hands right down, so it's almost like it's not really what you're looking at or paying attention to, you're just tapping along with the person with you. The EFT is beginning to work in a very, very beautiful and subtle way as you're doing that, as you have a conversation, and which is lovely. And of course, that develops rapport, that develops connection, and the beauty of that is that the two of you together, it's co-regulation of the system, isn't it?
It
You
is,
know,
yeah.
your energy system is helping to help the other person come back to balance, and the beauty, I mean, there's that beauty, isn't it? When we have another person who's there with us in an active listening role, that is stunningly powerful as well.
Yeah, it's that synchronizing that goes on, that they pick up on how you're responding, and it influences them as well.
All right, so Tony, you've shared an awful lot of information here. I could go on and on and on.
So could I as well, Tanya.
I think it's fascinating, and I love the work that you've done, and what you bring to this. So, if people wanted to find out more about your work or connect with you, Tony, how would they do that? I say Tony, but it's Anthony Roberts if you want to
It
find.
is. You always call me Tony, though, Tanya. So does everyone else. But if they want to find me, my website's www.anthony-roberts.co.uk. My email is inquiries@anthony-roberts.co.uk.
I just checked WW. Is it three W's? Yeah.
3 W's, yeah.
I wasn't sure whether you said two then.
It's possible that I could have, Tanya.
I have to listen to this after and check that out. So, www. Yep.
Yeah.
Anthony Roberts.
Hyphen Roberts.
Anthony.
Hyphens, that's a minus sign.
Yeah.
Roberts.co.uk.
UK. All right. So I will put that there. So, I mean, thank you very much, Anthony, for sharing this information. And final tip. Yep. Final tip. If someone who is doing EFT wants to start working with addictions, what would you say is the most important thing for them to do?
See if there's a local service out there who offers training, and you could give something back like I did. And with that, you're gaining knowledge and experience in a safe environment where you're getting support from other people who understand the subject around you.
All right. And thank you very much, Anthony, for that. And have a beautiful day.
Thanks very much, Tanya. Bye.
Bye-bye.